You built it in the garage, you and your dad. Sawdust on the floor, pencil marks on plywood, a hand plane that took off one shaving at a time. You didn't buy it, you didn't order it, you made it with your hands, and when it was done, you sat inside it and pointed it down a hill and let go. Before we dive in, hit subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where you are watching from. It started at the Chevrolet dealer. That's the part people forget. You didn't sign up at school. You didn't register online. You walked into your local Chevrolet dealership, the one on Main Street, the one your dad bought his truck from, and you told the man behind the desk you wanted to race. He handed you a rule book, a set of official wheels and axles, and a smile that said, "Good luck, kid." Everything else was up to you. You went home and you started building, not for a weekend, not for a week, for months. You and your father stood in the garage after dinner every night, working on a car that had no engine, no motor, no fuel, nothing but gravity and whatever shape you could carve out of wood and fiberglass that would cut through the air a little faster than the kid down the street. You sanded. God, did you sanded? You sanded until your fingers were raw and the wood was so smooth it felt like glass. Every curve mattered, every edge. Your dad showed you how to hold the plane, how to read the grain, how to take off just enough and not too much. You argued about the nose shape. You compromised on the paint color. You weighed on a bathroom scale and shaved off ounces wherever you could. Because in a race with no engine, weight was everything and nothing at the same time. Heavy enough to build speed, light enough to not drag. Some nights you stayed out there until your mother came to the garage door and said it was past 10 and you had school tomorrow. You didn't want to stop, neither did your dad. There was something about working on that car that made time disappear. No television, no radio, just the sound of the plane on the wood and the sandpaper on the curves, and your father saying, "Hold it right there," while he checked the angle with the square he'd had since before you were born. The garage smelled like sawdust and paint thinner, and the coffee your dad drank out of a mug that sat on the workbench and got cold every night because he forgot about it once he started working. That smell, sawdust, thinner, cold coffee, was the smell of building something with someone who loved you. You didn't call it that then, you called it working on the car, but it was more than that, and you both knew it. You painted it in the driveway on a Saturday morning. The color you chose was yours. Nobody else in town had that color on that car. This wasn't a kit. This wasn't a product off a shelf. This was the only one like it in the world. And you made it, and your dad helped, and somewhere between the first pencil line and the last coat of lacquer, something happened between the two of you that neither of you talked about, but both of you remember. Race day. You loaded the car into the back of the station wagon or the bed of the pickup truck and drove to the hill. The whole town was there, hundreds of people, maybe 1,000. Kids in numbered t-shirts standing next to cars they had spent the whole spring building, parents in lawn chairs, a public address system crackling, the smell of hot dogs and cut grass and nervous sweat. You carried your car to the starting line and set it in the lane. You climbed in, you put on the helmet. The starter said ready, the gate dropped. And for 11 seconds, you were the fastest thing on that hill. No engine, no noise, just the hum of the wheels on the asphalt and the wind in your face and the crowd getting louder as you crossed the finish line and did not know if you had won until you looked up and saw your dad running toward you. That was the Soapbox Derby. And for 40 years, it was one of the biggest events in America. Some of you did not race. Some of you stood on the side of the hill with your family and watched, and that was its own thing. The whole town came out, church groups, Boy Scout troops, the fire department, the mayor, the man from the hardware store who sold your dad the plywood. He was there too, standing behind the barrier, cheering for the kid whose car he helped cut the wood for. Everybody knew somebody on that hill. And when the gate dropped and the cars rolled and the crowd roared, you felt something you do not feel anymore. The feeling of an entire town caring about the same thing at the same time. It began in the summer of 1933 when a photographer named Myron Scott was on assignment for the Dayton Daily News and came across a group of boys racing homemade carts down a hill. Wooden crates, baby buggy wheels, no rules, pure chaos. Scott didn't just take pictures, he organized a formal race the following weekend. 362 kids showed up. The crowd was so large that Scott knew he had something bigger than a photo story. He trademarked the name Soapbox Derby, called every civic leader he knew, and by the next summer he had persuaded Chevrolet to sponsor a national championship. The first official All-American Soapbox Derby was held on August 19, 1934 in Dayton. By 1936, it had moved to Akron, Ohio, where the city used WPA funds to build a permanent track, Derby Downs, a 975-foot hill that became the Daytona of downhill racing. 70,000 people came to watch. 70,000! For kids in wooden cars with no engines. Chevrolet didn't just write a check. They made every dealer in America a sign-up point. You walked into your local Chevy showroom and the man who sold your father his Impala helped you register for the Derby. It was genius. It tied the brand to boyhood. It tied the car company to the kid who would one day buy a car. And over the years, Chevrolet awarded $1.7 million in college scholarships to the winners. This wasn't a toy. This was real. The stakes were real, the work was real, the car was real, and the hill was steep. And here's the detail that almost nobody knows. Myron Scott, the photographer who saw those boys on the hill and turned it into a national institution, later went to work at Chevrolet's marketing department. And while he was there, he was asked to help name a new sports car, a two-seat fiberglass roadster that needed a name as fast and sleek as it looked. Myron Scott named it the Corvette. The same man, the Soapbox Derby and the Corvette. Both came from the same eye that saw something beautiful in speed and said, yes, that deserves a name. For decades, the Derby was the biggest annual event in Akron. It was on national television. It was in newsreels. Norman Rockwell painted it. Boys Life covered it every summer. The winners became local heroes who rode in parades and got their picture in the paper and told the story for the rest of their lives. And every spring, in garages all over America, fathers and sons stood side by side with sandpaper and wood and a dream that weighed less than 100 pounds. Some of you won your local race and went to Akron. You remember the bus ride or the car ride or the train. However you got there, it was the longest trip of your life because your car was in the back and you kept turning around to make sure it was still there. You remember walking into Derby Downs for the first time and seeing that hill, steeper and longer than anything you'd raced on at home, and your stomach dropped because this was real now. This wasn't the street in front of your house. This was the national championship, and the boys next to you had cars that looked like they came from a wind tunnel. Some of you lost in the first heat. You sat on the grass with your dad and watched the rest of the races and clapped for every winner because that was the rule. You cheered for the kid who beat you and you meant it, and it was the first time in your life you understood what sportsmanship actually felt like when it cost you something. Some of you won. And the photograph from that day is still in a frame somewhere in your house. You in the car and the trophy and the grin of a boy who built something that was faster than every other kid in America for 11 seconds on a Saturday in August. In 1971, girls were allowed to race for the first time. The following year, everything changed. A General Motors vice president named John DeLorean, the same John DeLorean who would later build the stainless steel sports car and get arrested in an FBI sting, decided that the Soapbox Derby was outdated, too expensive. not aligned with changing American lifestyles. In 1972, after nearly 4 decades and $1.7 million in scholarships, Chevrolet pulled its sponsorship. The dealerships were no longer sign-up points. The money was gone. The infrastructure that had made the Derby possible in every town in America disappeared overnight. And then 1 year later, something happened that made it worse. August 19, 1973, Akron. 138 finalists, a 14-year-old boy named Jimmy Gronin won the championship, but something was wrong. In each successive heat, his car had been getting slower. Not by much, just a fraction of a second, as if something was running out of power, because something was. Hidden inside the nose of Jimmy Gronin's car was an electromagnet, a battery-powered device that grabbed the metal starting gate the instant it dropped, pulling the car forward with a burst of invisible force. It was not Jimmy's idea. His uncle, an engineer named Robert Brookings Lang, had designed and installed it. The magnet gave Jimmy a fraction of a second head start in every heat. And as the battery drained through 6 rounds of racing, the advantage shrank, and the car got slower, and the numbers told the story before anyone opened the hood. Jimmy was disqualified. The trophy was taken back. The story made national news. Editorials compared it to Watergate, which was unfolding at the same time, in the same summer, in the same country that was learning the hard way that cheating does not stay hidden forever. The cheater car is still on display at the Soapbox Derby Hall of Fame in Akron. They X-rayed it. The image hangs next to the car like evidence in a courtroom. You can see the magnet in the nose. You can see the battery. You can see the switch behind the headrest that a 14-year-old boy flipped at the starting line because a grown man told him to. The Derby survived. Technically, it still runs. Every summer, kids race at Derby Downs. But the 70,000 spectators are gone. The Chevrolet dealerships are gone. The national television coverage is gone. The newsreels are gone. The spring ritual of a father and son in a garage building something together that would carry one of them down a hill still happens, but it happens in a few hundred families now, not a few 100,000. What died wasn't the race. What died was the America that made the race feel like it belonged to everyone. The America where a Chevy dealer and a hill and a sheet of plywood were enough to make a boy believe he could build something fast. Where a father's only job on race day was to run toward the finish line. Where 70,000 people showed up to watch children do something that required no screen, no battery, no download, and no subscription. Just gravity, just a hill, just a car you built with your hands and the man who taught you how. If your dad stood in that garage with you, you know what this was. It wasn't about winning. It wasn't about the trophy or the scholarship or the newspaper photo. It was about the hours. The sawdust, the sanding, the arguing about the nose, the compromising on the color, the silence at the end of the night when the car was almost done and you both just looked at it and didn't say anything because what was there to say? You built something together and then you let it go. If this brought something back, share it with someone who stood in that garage with you and tell us in the comments, did you race?